So today I'm going to be talking to Tom Knight.
Hey.
Again. So we're going to do this
again.
This is what we call fundamentals, right? So the idea is it's about the basics of, in your case it'd be singing or whatever. So what I normally do is we just get straight into the thing about what's required in this case, singing or singing in a band or whatever. All right. So it might be an interesting start for this, for you to say how you got involved in singing, because I know
in singing. Yeah. So basically my route into singing. Well, I mean, I'm told that I was always making singing-like noises when I was really, really young. And just sort of doing all sorts of things musical in my parents' eyes anyway. And singing just kind of, I'd be singing in the back of the car, or I used to make radio shows in my bedroom and would sort of sing little jingles and things like that. And at the time I didn't know anything about radio. I was just mucking around. And then I joined. I went to King's School in Rochester for some time, and I got a scholarship to be a chorister at Rochester Cathedral Choir, and that's really, I guess, where the start of the journey was for me in terms of singing. And there was a big commitment being a singer, and being a chorister, because of the time commitment. You were expected to be there at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning to rehearse up in the cathedral, and then you'd do your school day, you'd do everything there, and then you'd go back to the cathedral and you'd do evensong, and you'd do your Sunday things, and it was full on. So from quite an early age, if you consider that's kind of before the primary age, if you like, early primary years, I guess. I was performing, and I was doing it in a very controlled manner, and I was doing it in a fashion like a tour, or like a gig. We used to go all over the country and do things. So I didn't really at that point have any visions of doing anything with it. I enjoyed it. It was nice, and I enjoyed the type of music we were doing, and it was just something to do. And then sort of moving on from that, after I left King's, I ended up at the school, strangely, that I teach at now, and I bumped into you, and like I said on the podcast that I was on with you, I'd had guitar lessons from you at King's, so that's where you and I first met. And when I left, with all due respect, I didn't really think of you at that time. I just left and ended up back at Mepham. ended up back at Mepham, and the piano, the music teacher there was Mrs. Highland. And I just remember it distinctly saying, I used to have a guitar teacher called Vic Highland, and and that's where that connection happened again. And I was very fortunate again I was given another scholarship at Mepham at that time, and so I was able to have lessons with you. I was fully involved with everything really to do with the music department from that point onwards. And I remember I wasn't strictly speaking having I was having some, I think it was singing and guitar I was doing with you. And so I started there, just got involved with the shows and things like that. And around about that sort of time, I was working. I started to do a few more things with Josh and a few more things with Dagger, and that's really, I guess, the point when we started to realise that, hang on, we could make some cash doing this. We could do something with this. So, our first band was born, and I guess the rest is history. And and I've gigged pretty solidly since the age of sort of 13, 14 onwards, really, maybe slightly later, but around that point. And then just moving in circles, meeting different people, and I always make a habit of trying to say yes to things. If it's going to be a bit of a challenge, I'm always up for a bit of a challenge, because my theory is that it keeps me fresh, teaches me new skills, and more importantly, gives me an opportunity to work with other people that I might not work with, and that's exciting for me. So, and I'm very grateful for the places I've been to and the people I've worked with. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's really it in a nutshell, anyway.
Yeah. So the thing is that let's have a look at that that early bit, because I think this is quite an important thing for singers. You were so young, being a chorister. You don't even know, you're a chorister, but you're probably so young you don't even think much about the singing. You just do the singing.
No, and I wouldn't consider that the mechanics of singing is not something that I know in here. No. And it's only very recently, really, that I've had to acknowledge the fact that actually with singing, again, I hate sounding pretentious, but I just sort of do it, I was actually discussing with somebody the other day who is Royal Academy of Music trained, and we were on a gig together, and I was playing this little scale on the guitar, and he said, "Oh, you're playing this." And I was like, "What am I?" And he said, "Well, what you could do is you could add this version in there." I was like, "Oh, okay." So he played it for me on the sax, and I then just transferred it over to the guitar. And he said, "Oh man, I'd love to be able to do that." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Well, I've just played you the note, and you've just worked out the note, and you've done it." And we had this long conversation about the musical ear and stuff like that. And and I have to acknowledge now that I'm very I don't know. I love the fact that I can do that.
Yeah.
But it's awkward.
See, when I see that, because this is one of the sort of themes that comes up so much when I'm interviewing people, is that a lot of people who are really good can do the stuff, and then later on they have to work out what it is they're actually doing so that they can teach it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And this happens so much that it seems to be a theme. And I think that's the interesting thing, that a lot of people who are good at doing things, they just develop it without having to think about it too much. And I think this is what I was getting at about being so young when you started singing. A lot of that skill, the oral training, the physicality of singing, and all that stuff that accompanies being able to sing, which is the musical background that gives you the ability to hear something and then find it on an instrument, seems like sort of sorcery. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you do that? Because I have to sit down and work out what the such and such a mode is.
Yeah.
And because I've been trained to do that. So I think that's an interesting thing. So
absolutely.
So that early part then, because you are singing so regularly, becomes an important staging for that. So would you say, as an advice to people to sing, because obviously they can't go back to when they were 4, if you see what I mean, or they were 6 or whatever, but even if they're starting off now, is there something that they could do?
I think it's regularity.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
With absolutely anything, if you want to be good, you want to get better at cooking, you have to do it more.
Yes.
And I regularly say it to my students, and I know obviously they're of a younger age, but actually the hardest thing in the world is, at a young age, people want results quickly. They want to do well. Fundamentally, young people want to do really, really well. They want to succeed. I can't say I blame them, and the hardest thing is they don't yet understand that it's not Amazon Prime. You can't just order it and it's here today. And therefore it's what I teach is obviously I teach the theoretical side of it. I teach the performance side of it, but also I'm trying to get across to them the idea that actually a great deal of it comes from you. So I think I would say regularity. You've got to do it regularly. You've either got to listen to it and study it, because there's definitely a distinction between listening for enjoyment and listening to learn.
Yes.
When I sit down to learn a piece of music for a gig or for a session or for whatever I'm needing to do it for, I find that the results are far better if, I sit there with whatever device is playing. It could be my phone. I might have my earphones in. I've got the lyrics in front of me, and I do it piece by piece. And I get to maybe past the first verse, pause it, I go back to the beginning, I do it again. And it's that repetition and regularity. So I would say that that's the most important thing. You've got to consume it in a different way.
Yeah. Can I jump in there? Because there's something that you said I think is really important. You're saying about you doing things like if you're learning a piece, you're doing it in small chunks, and then you
Definitely.
that like verse 1 or something like that. Is that how?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the song, because some songs just kind of jump out at me a little bit more clearly than others.
Yeah.
If it's something that's really complex, I will break it right down into very, very small chunks and piece it together. If it's something that's like a standard 12-bar blues or 3-chord trick or whatever it is, it's easier to process. That's definitely, I'll chunk it up.
Cool, great. So, what about the technical stuff? Because again, I think with your story, there was a lot of technical stuff that you didn't realise was technical stuff at the time. You see what I mean? If you're learning to be a chorister, what would you say that people what could they do that could be technique? I use that loosely, but I mean, what is technique? There's no real definition. Well, there is, but like in this sense, strange things. I've always been quite observant on sounds, and it was my dad recently used to say, "Oh, I used to hum along to the Hoover," which made me worry that I was a bit mad. But I used to, it jogged my memory. I used to harmonise with it. So the harmony, obviously the note or the pitch or whatever that Hoover was doing, I'd just sing notes that sounded nice with it. And, in terms of the technical side of things, I would practice your intervals, and to be boring, that's working out the difference between one note and the next note and trying to think about the mechanics, really analyze and really think about what's changing here when you do that. So when you move from an what's changing, and try and actually physically feel the difference within you of those notes. So I would try. Again, it goes back to how you're listening to yourself, but also it's you've got to feel that change from within you so that you can do it again. And again, there's something you can do where you can improve the access to your head voice by sliding from your chest voice up into your head voice so that you can recognize could
that
you do
point.
That? Could you demonstrate?
You heard it on the way down, so it sort of goes from head down into chest. But it's just small little things like that, which possibly a little bit unorthodox, but they work for me. I would always be singing along to pieces of music, and I'd always be trying to match the notes the person was singing. So I think it comes down to that note. And when I go back to the radio show thing, I think I used to do that in my bedroom. I actually think that was really useful as well, because I didn't know it at the time, but really what I was doing was I'd always listen back to it just for the fun of it and to see, oh, that was cool, I did that. But actually with the jingles I was singing, which were just stupid little jingles, actually probably what I was doing was hearing what I was doing and then just sort of maybe tuning it, changing the intonation of it, or and just reflecting on it.
Let me tell you another story, because there's something here that I think is really, really powerful, and we overlook this as just being a bit of a weird thing, but I think there's something significant here. There are certain things about learning, I think, which are contextual, meaning it's not really about the specifics. It's not, necessarily like if you're playing a musical instrument like guitar, like learning that scale. It's almost like believing that you are actually within a band that will be playing songs that do things like that. It's like a mind game. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. So the jingle thing falls into, the radio show falls into this. It's almost like unconsciously you're putting yourself into a mode of believing that you are a radio DJ. Now, I'll give you an example of this, because this is another thing that came up quite a lot amongst guitarists. And you might go, this happened to me. I'm not saying it will, but
I think I know what you're going to say.
Okay. I had a guitar, a plastic guitar, when I was a little kid, and I was 2, 3. And my one, I used to stand in front of the mirror and pretend I was Elvis. Now, here we go.
Well, you have got the hips for it.
Yeah, I know, I have. Absolutely. Gordon Giltrap did that. He had a plastic guitar. John Etheridge had one. Ray Burley, who's a really famous classical guitar player, had one. Right. I think Clive Carroll, who's another great guitar player, had one. And the only difference was they had different names on the headstock. So some of them had Elvis, and some of them had not Burt Weedon, Hank Marvin, and so on. So you've got a whole bunch of people who became professional and really famous guitar players who did the plastic guitar thing when they were little kids.
Yeah.
Now, you might just go, well, that's coincidence, but I don't think it is. I actually think there's something weird that goes on unconsciously.
I think it's projection, isn't it? I mean, I know.
So I do think it is.
I knew exactly what you were going to say, and I used to do the same. I used to do it with pots and pans. I used to do it, all the time. Yeah. Tennis rackets, you name it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's that sort of thing. And the drummers who played on pots and pans, right?
Yeah. No, actually, I was using a pot and pan to be a guitar.
Oh, okay.
My brother, I remember distinctly my brother and I can remember the kitchen. I remember we were washing up and drying up. I was drying up. We had Addicted to Love playing really loudly, and we were using the pots and pans. So, yeah, but I think that projection, it puts that, it's putting you in the mindset, this is what I want to do. And
exactly. It's a for example, thing, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, but I didn't really realize that up until the second I saw, and my brother showed me Back to the Future, and the scene where they played Johnny Be Good. I remember watching it, just being absolutely mesmerized by it. And, now I know obviously it's miming and things like that, but I was like, I want to do that. I want that guitar. I want to do that. So, and that was it. That's when it registered that actually that's what I wanted to do.
I actually think that thing about believing that you can do something, particularly when it's something like singing, because singing is one of those things you can't go like most musical instruments. Well, you've got to put your fingers there.
Yeah, you can't manipulate.
You can't do that, can you? And it's all a mind game about projecting sound. It's like, well, visualizing the sound coming out of this, and like a light, and So
I think absolutely anybody can sing, Vic. I really do. I think it's a case of learning how that person learning how to do it in a weird sort of way. I mean, they just need to have the confidence to do it. They need to have the confidence to muck up. They need to have the confidence to know that somebody will probably say they're rubbish. And truly and honestly, at the end of the day, if they enjoy it, it doesn't really matter what anyone says. And there's always going to be better singers than others, and there's no doubting that. But I go back to the point of you've got to just do it. If you love it, if you're interested in doing it, you've got to try it.
Exactly.
Nobody ever learns to ride a bike by not getting on the bike.
Exactly. And I think the other thing also where a lot of people fall down is in any instrument, you have to find your own voice.
Yeah.
But obviously with singing, that's even more of a truism, that you have to find your own voice, because a lot of people think that the voice that they're aiming for is Adele's or it's, whoever it is, Robert Palmer or something, you know what I mean? Well, no, it's, you might listen to those and get your inspiration for your own voice and find
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's something that
well, that's where I liken singing to, any other instrument, because of the fact that, a guitarist learns licks of Hank Marvin and learns the licks of Hendrix, and then they bring it all together and they mush it and they make their own thing. And it's the same with singing as well. I love Stevie Wonder, and but I love Robert Plant, and I equally love Freddie King and singers like that. So it's all of those influences, like you just said, that you bring in and you put them all in the pot, and you access them when you need them. Sometimes subconsciously I might sound a bit like Stevie, sometimes I might sound a bit like D'Angelo, sometimes I might do this, sometimes and you bring it together. And what I'm still trying to get to grips with is that's very unconscious, that I don't say in my head, right now at this point in this verse I'm going to sing it like D'Angelo, unless I'm really having to plan ahead. And there have been certain times when I've had to learn things for sessions where it's got to be very specific, and that's when you really have to get down to that level of detail. But ultimately, I think you got a bag, a metaphorical bag full of licks and tricks, and when you're feeling that way, it accesses that compartment, and when you're feeling that way, it goes there. So,
do you think are there any sort of tricks to that?
Sorry, mate.
Do you think there's any tricks to that about being able to like because I know Stevie Wonder's a big influence on you.
You just got to be obsessive.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be obsessive, and you've got to be hungry to think, how on earth are they doing that?
Yeah.
There's a Donny Hathaway.
I was going to say Donny Hathaway was the next person I was going to talk about, actually.
Yeah.
So go on, far
I
away.
love Donny. And I don't remember the name of the song specifically, and please don't ask me to do it because I don't think I'll be able to. But the song is "We're Alone Now," and I'm singing a song for you. And there's this line, "We were alone." Not too bad.
Yeah.
And the way he just sings it just comes from nowhere, because up until that point it's been really straight, really melodic, but really straight, but really beautiful. And it just comes from from somewhere. And I remember hearing that in the car, took it back to the beginning of the track, and I even just started skipping back to that bit, just trying to work out those intervals again.
Yeah.
And and it's just obsessing with it. There's a live version of "All I Do" by Stevie Wonder when he played at the O2. And actually, I was at the gig when he played that night, and I remember hearing it and being like, "How on earth did he do that?" And there's just next level singers.
Yeah. Because obviously, because you're saying about Donny Hathaway. I mean, his version of "Jealous Guy," and which I know you do, and "The Ghetto," because that's that's such a great, and it's just like a jam anyway. That one, isn't it? Yeah. So you could, that sort of thing, but also Sam Cooke had that sort of way of taking a line and sort of twisting it around, improvising with how he was going to sing that line.
Yeah.
Stuff, which is as you say, they're sort of their trademark of how they do that. Yeah. Cool. Brilliant. Okay, so some advice then about people singing with others, singing in a band. What can you...
Practice. Again, obsess about it, but not in a really, I say be obsessive. I mean, be obsessive when you're on your own. Enjoy, enjoy it, live for it, live, breathe and sleep it, record it, listen back to it, pick holes in it. But don't be too critical of yourself, because actually that's a disservice. You don't do yourself any favors by picking holes in everything. You have to acknowledge where you need to improve. That's the level of sort of self-criticism you need to do. That's it. Don't go any further than that. It doesn't need to go any further than I've made a mistake there.
Yeah.
The next bit is how do I fix that?
Here's a question that I know that would come up for a lot of people who sing. A lot of people don't like the sound of their voice. Yeah. Even when they actually sound really good, they personally don't like the sound of their voice. Yeah. Now, I think it's because the sound that they've got in their head about what they think they sound like is not the same necessarily as what is actually out there. And that mismatch jars with some people.
Well, I think there's a reason for that. It's because if I sing to you, I'm hearing it differently to you.
Yeah, of course you are.
Because attached to my voice, from my perspective, is the resonance that I'm getting through my body. Yeah. Whereas for you, all you hear is through your ears.
Yes, exactly.
You're not getting the vibrations in your mouth. You're not getting all those other little things that are only very slight, but they could also make a difference. I mean, listening back, if you're listening back to a recording, I think that goes back down to that whole reflectiveness, and that being critical of yourself. You'll be like, oh, I didn't do that very well. Yeah. And there's tracks that I've sung on that producers have absolutely really, really loved and really been happy with, and they've sent me home and I've put cash in my pocket, and I've left thinking, bloody hell, I've really pulled a fast one there. But they've,
no, that's the sort of thing I'm getting at, because I think there's another one of those things that, when you're working on something, you feel, if it comes from a feeling point of view, it's like, it just doesn't sit with me, that, whatever it is, and yet somebody else could like it, and it's really difficult to be able to step aside, isn't it?
Well, in that context, of course, in that case, if the producer's happy, they're happy. And that's kind of the point when I go, okay, cool, it's not my product anymore, it's over to you. It's your product. So
maybe that's the thing, that thing of being able to step aside, from, I've done that and they're happy with it, and that's enough. Without I mean, don't get me wrong, I know it's of a standard,
You know, but yeah, there's still little imperfections that I might be a bit like. You know, I recorded a video the other day, and I've just for fun, just posted it up online. I've got to learn it for a gig I'm doing in a couple of weeks, and it's a D'Angelo tune. It's a tune I've always loved, and I just learned the chords, started playing around with it. I was like, actually, this sounds really nice. A nylon string guitar, the acoustics in the room I was sort of playing in sounded good. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a video. And it wasn't until I listened back to it a couple of days later I realised that first note is out. Like, but you know, to other people it may not be, but I'm not happy with it. But you know, you have to get to a point where you just have to be like, well, live with it. You know, I have to live with it and move on with it. Otherwise, going back to that obsessive nature of it, you could just sit there and go, no, that note was imperfect. I'm going to do it again. I'm doing it. And actually, it's those colourful moments that make it natural and make it real. So what's the point of making it pure? You know?
Exactly. That is exactly right. Yeah, I totally agree. Any advice for singers that are being drowned out by the guitarists?
Probably not I can say out loud.
No, but you know, this is one of the things. Unfortunately, you've got to fight your space, I think, don't you?
Yeah, sometimes monitoring is important, you know, and it's not only from a being able to hear what you're doing point of view, but from the point of view of vocal health.
Yeah.
You know, if you're constantly having to battle with other instruments in the band, you know, and you're the only vocalist, you're gonna do some injury. You're gonna do yourself some damage. So I would say invest in a really good monitor. If you're doing it and you know, and you're going out and you're working it, invest in a good monitor. Either a nice set of in-ear monitors, but that takes a bit of practice and getting used to using in-ear stuff. You can buy these personal little monitors that you put up on a stand that goes pretty much right in front of your face. I've only used one of those once. I found that quite impressive. Or, you know, the cheapest option is just to say, look, we need to turn it down a bit. But that's never the favourable one and always really hard to control. I don't think, you know, people are not turning it up on purpose. They're turning it up to get the tone or to get the sound or to get whatever.
Well, I've always found that tended to be more of a problem for female vocalists when they're dealing with people in a band because of the sort of power level. That they don't, and of course what they do is they sort of over sing in order to compensate for.
Well, they're probably belting. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, and then that really.
Either gender, really, you know, you've got to think about it. You're using a muscle constantly when you're singing, so you need to use it effectively. You need to use it with as little effort as you can.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one way that you can be sure to be singing healthily is to make sure that the levels are appropriate or that you can hear yourself. So I would say, you know, it's worth the investment with the monitoring. And, you know, I a few years ago, I invested in in-ear monitors just personally because I couldn't be bothered to lug around this massive monitor. It was getting a bit tiresome. And it took a long time to get used to. And even now, when I use my in-ears, I always have one that's ever so slightly out because when you have your earphones in, you sound weird. So I just have one that comes ever so slightly out. But the more I do it, the easier that becomes. You're not supposed to do that, I've been told, but it's just hard. It's really hard. But I've been told if you take one out, actually what you're doing is you're reducing the effectiveness of it. So it's just something to practice with. But the cheapest option is to get yourself a little powered monitor. I think Mackie do them. They sit on a little tripod stand right in front of your face, and they're pretty cool.
That's very useful information, Tom.
Yeah, definitely get one.
Yeah. So, okay, what about some tips about performance?
Yeah.
You know where to stand. You know how to stand. You know anything that.
It's a really weird one for me because I've said to you, I know I've said to you before, Vic, about the idea of modes, and I didn't really realise that this is what I was doing, but that stage is yours. This is how I've seen it for a very long time. You know, I'm happy to share the stage. Don't get me wrong, but I have to have that mindset in my head. I own that stage. Like, you know, this is my pulpit. You know, this is where I'm delivering my musical sermon from. This is where, you know, the fun stuff is happening. And so, you know, I'm not a strutting peacock. I don't jagger it up around there. But certainly, you need a prop. I feel like either, you know, if you feel like you're a bit of a wally walking around or just holding the mic, you pick that mic up and you move around with it. You know, that's owning the stage. That's, you know, moving over to a member of the band, singing at them for a little bit, you know, turn around and directing the drummer, or if
Yeah.
you want to do something with the group, as long as you've practiced it, or
Yeah.
as long as they know what your cues mean. So, if you're the only singer, you are the focal point, and you're the captain of fun. When I'm allowed to gig in front of audiences again, and when they're allowed to dance and when they're allowed to sing, the hope is that they will. I think they're going to be really up for it. People love to have a good time, and I like to facilitate that. It's not. I think that this is a really important thing for me, actually. There's a lot of bands who play for themselves, and they don't necessarily. I don't necessarily mean that they turn inward and they look at each other and that's it. But you've got to consider your audience. Your audience they're the people consuming your product.
Yeah.
And again, I go back to the idea of it being a product, but it's so true. Ultimately, if you're just playing for yourself, yes, technically you might be really, really good. Theoretically, you might be incredible. You might have the best tone in the world, but your audience are not getting much. They're getting a good show in their ears, but they're not necessarily getting a good show on their eyes. And I think you need to think about that sometimes. And from my perspective, you've got to interact with them. You've got to, talk to them. You've got to do something. Even go out there. Days gone by, I would happily put my wireless guitar thing on and I'd move out and I'd act like a prat in front of, with the audience, dance around. That's the experience of it, and that's memorable. And then from a business point of view, the hope is, and I don't do it for this reason, but people like that. And that then generates potentially more positive word of mouth, and that could get you some more work. So ultimately, you've got to own that stage, and you've got to smile, and that's infectious. You've got to show like you were having a good time, and hopefully the idea is that everyone else will have a good time too.
Yeah, because when sort of early on, somebody said to me, if you don't look like you're having fun, no one else is having fun, right? It's as simple as that. And now, because we understand things like mirror neurons, when you look at somebody who's doing something, you actually sort of mirror that thing. But it's like
behavior.
It's like the person it's the person yawning in the room. The mirror neurons make everybody else yawn in the room,
Yeah.
And I think as a front person, that's a really important thing. How you move on the stage is, that's the visual thing, isn't it? When people are looking, because a small movement can actually generate a lot of activity.
Yeah.
When you're playing, and if everybody's doing that, that actually gives a whole series of stuff going on that catch people's attention. And of course, that whenever I've done like the coaching stuff for bands, that's always the classic thing to start with. They're not going to be. They're going to look rubbish. Generally.
Yeah. But they're so concerned with making sure they're doing the right thing.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And it goes back to my point of people wanting to do well.
Yes. But the interesting point about that is that people often feel that what they habituate, how they stand and what they do, is right because it feels comfortable, because it's just a habit, right?
Yeah.
And when you change that, they don't like that until they see it. Like if you video them doing it.
Yeah.
And then they think, oh God, yeah, that looks a lot better. But it didn't feel right, you see.
No, absolutely.
And again, it's this sort of thing of doing it enough, isn't it? So that.
Yeah, that regularity.
Yeah.
It's the same with students I work with. I teach secondary school students, and they're all fantastic, and they all want to do well. And you sometimes get somebody who comes in with a fantastic voice or a fantastic, acumen on an instrument, and they just stand there. And it's interesting. I really enjoy that journey that they go on. And there's a student who I can think of very specifically who had a great voice, did the whole sort of crooner thing for a young lad, did it really, really well. Had a very nice sounding voice, really good tone for that sort of stuff. But he just stands still. And I remember saying to him, look, your goal is that for the Christmas show, you're going to sing this. And, what? I said, look, we've got plenty of time. I said, but you're not just going to stand there. I said, you're going to get in that hall every night after school, which is where you'll perform. And I mean, he's very fortunate he could do that. And I said, and you're going to plot out your movements. And that, you know, and that came from, for me, I have to see where I'm going to perform before I start. I have to know what my limitations are. It's really bizarre. It's a little ritual of mine. As soon as I get to a venue, I've got to see it. You know, and we got to that Christmas show, and he was, oh man, it was absolutely breathtaking. He was up, he was with the audience, he did the whole crooner thing. He'd studied, you know, Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and all those greats. He'd watched them performing in those environments with an audience right in front of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he picked it up. He got the moves. You know, he had choreographed something, but it wasn't choreographed in the sense of, you know, it didn't look animatronic. It didn't look forced. He made it look really natural, and he practiced it. But it goes back to, he took that on board and he utterly obsessed about it, and he nailed it. And I think if you really want to achieve anything musically, you've got to have that regularity. You've got to be really keen to know, how do they do that? Right, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, and make mistakes, fail, succeed. You'll get there eventually. It might just take time, you know. But it's I absolutely love it. I've missed it massively. And I would say to anybody of any age, you can do it. You just got to crack on.
Oh, totally. You know? Yeah, any age, absolutely believe.
Yeah, just try it, and you're going to probably fall off, you know. And I say to my year 7s now, you know, when they get frustrated that they can't play a C major chord or they can't do it, I always ask them to put the word yes at the end, because inevitably you will be able to one day if you persevere. And I, you know, it's only since I've had children that I've really thought this way. You know, we all walk, you know, mostly, you know, and or we do things that are significantly challenging. Swimming, you know, learning to ride a bike.
Yes.
Why didn't we give those things up? You know.
Yeah, totally.
And actually, that's because we're of an age where we don't know.
When people say, "Well, I'm not musical," you go, "Well, you know, you've actually accomplished the most difficult tasks already, and you did that before the age of 3, probably."
Yeah.
Which is learn to move around, which is unbelievably complicated, right?
Yeah.
And talk, and sort of dance. I mean, if you look at little kids, they can dance. Whatever, as soon as they can stand up, they can dance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man.
So it's, you know, and it is that thing that they don't give up. You know.
Yeah, they don't know about giving up at that age.
No, absolutely. So, any closing thoughts?
Love it. You know, love what you're doing. If you're passionate, even if you just love music, you've got to consume it. You've got to enjoy it. I'll keep going back to it, but it's true. You've got to listen to it in a different way, access music in a different way, experience different music. You know, don't pigeonhole yourself with just learning Elvis tunes. You know, see who inspired Elvis or see who inspired that person, and go on that journey and find out more. And you know, that's what I love. You know, I really enjoy doing that as well, finding new artists and, you know, trying to sing like that person, and then think, well, how are they doing that? So yeah, man, it's just ultimately, if you enjoy it, consume it. You know, listen to it as much as you can. Practice it in your own unique way. Find things that work for you. Try and figure out the mechanics of your voice. You know, how is it I move from this note to this note? What changes in here? You know, and also think about it here, like, because, you know, we never really think about the tone of our voice when we speak. It just happens. You know, I'm not sitting here now thinking I'm passionate about this. I want to sound enthusiastic, so I'm going to raise the tone of my voice at this point. You know, obviously there I was, but prior to all of that, wasn't. So yeah, that's what I find fascinating, is it happens instantly. And you don't really have to think about certain things. So in order to learn the difficult things, I think we do have to strip it back and think, okay, what about the mechanics? How does it work? And then once you've worked that bit out, you can do it.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, well, look forward to seeing you at Bluescamp. That'll be good.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah, it's been far too long. So yeah, anybody that's coming, we're looking forward to seeing you. And anybody that's listening, get yourselves down. It's a fantastic weekend. I absolutely love it. And it's what I love about that, Vic, and I've said it to you year after year that we've done it, is I love seeing the transformation from somebody that might turn up on the Friday being a bit frightened, a bit anxious, and a bit like, what's going to happen? And then by the middle to end part of that day, they're doing something that they didn't even dream they'd be doing. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, mate. It's going to be great.
Yeah, cool. Good one. Well, thanks ever so much, Tom.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Look after yourself.
That's good, mate. Yeah, that's good. See you soon. Cheers.
See ya.